Good afternoon. My name is Guthrie Thomas. I'm a guitarist, songwriter, and recording artist, among other things. And I get a lot of requests here as to what I might be using at home as a recording setup prior to going into the studio to do it on a professional CD. All right, I thought I might go over it a little bit. I use what they call Studio One Pro. It's DAW, a digital audio workstation in techno lingo. There's all kinds of these out there. One of them's Pro Tools, is probably the most popular. We'll talk about that later, but the one we use here at home is Studio One Pro. I'm going to go over the basics, introduction, do a couple more documentaries on how to make it work. This, of course, is my professional website. For those of you not familiar with my work, this is only half of my albums. I've done another 25 or so, and I've produced another 30 or so of other folks and several motion picture projects. So if you're not familiar with my work, you can check it out on YouTube. My family puts it up there all the time. All right, let's get to Studio One. Now, downloading Studio One takes about a half an hour, only because of the activation and authorization registration coding needed, and about 10 minutes to download the audio box. We're going to get into that shortly. Now, again, Pro Tools is one of the most popular DAWs out there. However, if you have Windows 7, you want to be cautious in purchasing it. We have 3 state-of-the-art computers here, all with Core i7 processors, 20 gigs of RAM in each, and we cannot get it to work. Now, we use it down at the studio on a professional release on a CD. However, we cannot get it to work here on these brand new computers. So I'm sure it's an operating system problem that Pro Tools hasn't worked out. Hopefully they will in the future. Okay, now I hear it works fine on Macintosh. So it's really, you want to check out, do your research, check the specs, and maybe even call Pro Tools and find out what the problem is before you buy it. And if you do buy it, be able to take it back if you have Windows 7. Now, Studio One, we don't have that problem at all. Downloaded without any problems at all, and works just fine. That's all I can say about the quality. All right. Now, Studio One comes in 2 different versions, the artist version and the pro version. Now, save yourself some time. Just get the pro version. It's $50 more. The artist version cannot do many of the functions that are required in actually recording, like mastering and even mixing down to an MP3. So just save yourself the time and trouble. Go ahead and get the Studio One Pro. You'll be happy you did. All right, let's talk about it a little bit. Now, I'm going to go over the start page. Again, this is going to be directed mostly at singer-songwriters because that's what I do. This also applies to bands and rock stars and all that other thing if you don't know anything about Studio One. However, you can do multi-track recording, you can do single-track recording, you can do all kinds of things at a very professional level. In fact, some of the things I can do here, I don't even wonder why I'm even going down to the studio at all, because some of the solo track stuff I can do here is as quality is just as fine as the professional studio. All right, I'm going to go over the start page. This is what you're going to see when you first get it downloaded. And it takes about, like I said, 20 minutes to download it and about 10 minutes to download the red hot box, basically is what I call it. It's an audio box USB SIO driver, a sound card, and a MIDI and in and outs, and we'll go over that in a minute. All right, over here on the right, when you first get started, you're going to see the update feed. This is a live feed from PreSonus, who makes this product. They should pay me, and they don't. I'm going to have to write them a letter because the product is good, and I'm sitting here advertising it. Over here is the live feed for updates like new VSTs, new plugins, new instruments, even updates on the program itself. We just updated this one 2 days ago. From the last 1.5 version, we updated it to 1.6. It works just fine. So obviously this live feed works very well. Just keeps you abreast on what's happening with Studio One. All right. Over right next to that, on that tab, is the demos. This doesn't really apply to me. None of the music here is even remotely close to mine. However, it's good music, and listen to it. It'll give you a good idea of what you can do with Studio One. Okay, here in the middle is your ego section. That's where you put your name and what you do and your website, that sort of thing. This will not apply to actually recording. However, in the mastering section, you can put in your meta tags, and that will show up on your playbacks, let's say on iTunes, for instance. So that's what you take care of in mastering in the meta tag section. We'll get into that in the documentary down the road. All right, the little blue box, what does it do? This is the audio box. This is, first of all, this is a 2-channel box. You can get this in various different numbers of channels. I only need a this particular 2-channel model, but I can do multi-track recording with this very box. I don't need an entire 16-channel blue box, in other words, for what I do. And this box comes with 2 ins, 2 outs in the back for your masters or your speakers. Also MIDI in, MIDI out on the back, and a headphone out. Now, headphones are real important. Make sure you get a really good pair. You're only as good as your speakers say you are. That's the way I look at it. So my particular headphones cost $250. I don't expect everybody to rush right down and buy those. They're 8 kgs, but it's what I use in the studio, so whatever I use in the studio, I try to use here. Okay. Now, all of getting this downloaded is all self-explanatory. It takes about 10 minutes to download the box. You download the box first, and then you download the program, and in about 45 minutes you'll be recording. All right, below that we have a configure audio device, which they walk you through. This is basically an audio device. If you had another one, if you wanted to configure one that was compatible with this particular program, this is where you do it. It's all a walkthrough thing. You don't have any problem. It's fully understandable. Same thing with external devices below that, like a controller, keyboard, or the fader port, which we will talk about in the next documentary. Fader port's just an idiot box so that you don't have to use your keyboard as much. And the updates, self-explanatory. Studio One, about, self-explanatory. All right, over here on recent files. Now, this is very important. It's also very handy. I can go back 4 weeks, for instance, and right there at the bottom and pull up a song that I worked on 4 weeks ago. And that's very, very handy. That's the only time I've ever seen that in any of these DAW programs. So this way I don't have to really go look for it on the computer, for instance. Okay, now we're going to go up here to the top right. It says open an existing song or project. Again, if you have Studio One Artist, you cannot open a project because you cannot have that function in Artist. It's for mastering. Create a new project. Again, that's mastering. We'll go again. We'll talk about that in the next documentary or soon thereafter. This is what you want. Create a new song. Now, what you're going to do is create a new song, obviously, unless you write books. And of course, you could write a book right here, too. So we're going to click on that, and this little dialog box is going to come up. This is going to give you various recording template possibilities. You get to choose which one's good for you. And in this case, with me, it's Singer-Songwriter, so I go to the bottom. I don't know why they keep vocal and guitar at the bottom, and every big giant rock star is usually a vocal and a guitar, and that's always at the top. However, they keep us little old songwriters down here at the bottom. So what you want to do is click on that. And that's what we're going to work on today, and that's where I always start, even though I don't use these tracks, which I will explain shortly. All right, up here you want to name this. I'm going to name this GT Studio One Documentary 1, GTSO1. That's my way of knowing what it is. So be sure and name your stuff, otherwise it's going to get titled for you under new song and a number. And if you do 100 of these a month like I do, then you're just going to be looking for a number that you don't remember, named new song. So if you title it, obviously you'll be able to find it pretty quick. And once you've clicked on vocal and guitar, which is where we're going to start today, then just hit OK. It's going to take you to the recording program, and there it is. Now, this is really fascinating. And I'm going to go over some of this right now, and in the next documentary, I'm going to go over some of it more in detail and how to make it work. Now, this thing is already preset. Up here you can see it's got 2 tracks, a vocal and a guitar, which is what we chose in the previous screen. Now, you can change this to a screaming cat, and you can change this to bongos if you want. So these can be retitled, in other words. Now, both of these are hot. That means they're ready to record. You can take them off record by clicking that red button with the black dot in it. And these are for your monitors. And up here you have a mute and a solo button. Now, these are all these buttons you're going to have to, with all studio programs, it's really a trial and error, hit and miss, experiment until you find it. Because the manuals, and for instance, the manual on this is 300 pages, and it doesn't really discuss a whole lot about each topic. You know, these very complex programs, it's hard to say a lot, and the manual would be as tall as the Empire State Building, and you wouldn't be able to read it anyway. So sometimes you can find it just by doing it rather than trying to find it in the manual. In other words, sometimes it's quicker just to figure it out for yourself rather than try to find it in the manual. So that's why I don't fly on the space shuttle. Okay, now down here you have your channels, your faders. We'll get into that in the next documentary. And we're going to talk about this little important box over here. This is the browser. And you can open and close this browser right there with the browse button. And this particular, what's showing now is all of the instruments in the Pro version, and they update this all the time, so you're always constantly adding new instruments and plugins and that sort of thing. And this just has dozens and dozens of possibilities and instruments. For a singer-songwriter like myself, most of this doesn't apply, but you can really do some amazing stuff with this. You could create an entire orchestra and perhaps 2 or 3. So you kind of just want to go through that. It takes quite a while to figure out what all these do, and the only way to know is to just try them and listen to them. And I'm going to show you how to do that shortly. And just scroll up and down till you find out what you want to put in your new tune, and it's probably there. Now over here, right next to the instruments, is effects with the tab there below, and these are all the different effects: phasers, flangers, Pro EQ, just compressors, limiters, just all kinds of effects here, and including the all-important reverb. And they have probably 25 to 30 to 40 different reverb settings. So and if you want to try and set your own reverb, that could take forever. You could probably find it in any one of these 35 preset reverbs. At least I did. So when I actually do my recording here at home before I go down to the professional studio, I try to get a very, very close sound to what I want it to sound like in the studio. I take the CD down and we get a very close reference. And in a lot of cases, I can actually get it so close that it's almost exact, especially if you take the same headphones with you. So keep that in mind. Whatever you do here, you can use as a reference in the studio. But at the same time, if you do just singer-songwriter stuff like I do, it could very easily be taken straight to CD, and you don't even have to go to the studio at all if you really, really know what you're doing. All right. Now that's the browser. And again, I'm going to go over some keystrokes right now. These are important. Rather than looking up in the manual and all that, I'm just going to go over the basics, basic keystrokes to help you out, and then I'm going to end it, and we'll go to the documentary number 2. All right, the all-important keystroke, of course, is record, and that is the asterisk button on your keyboard. When you hit that, you'll see your little white line going across there, your timeline, and the recording track is now recording. It's probably recording what I'm saying. Now to hear, to stop it, you just hit the 0 on your keyboard and the number pad, and that will stop your track. And then if you want to go back, let's say you didn't like that take, you just hit Control-Z, and that eliminates what you just did. And to go back to the beginning or the start, and what we call the top in recording industry, and the end would be called the tails in the old days, you just hit Shift-B, and that takes you back to the beginning. Now, I'm not so sure you can actually see the white line that I'm seeing. I don't know why, but sometimes it doesn't show up in these screen captures, but it's there, and you'll see it when you run your program. All right, now one other little addition which I do is I'm adding tracks all the time. Sometimes I work with a piano, and there are various other simple instruments. You can just hit T, and that will create a new track. I'm going to go into this in the next documentary only because I set up my vocals and I set up my acoustic guitars in a very special way so that they emulate exactly what the studio sounds like. And I have to do that in a special way. And so I'm going to cancel out of this for right now. We'll get into that in the next documentary. In other words, I don't use these 2 tracks that I pulled up from the template screen. I'm going to eliminate these tracks. I just wanted to show you a quick demo that the tracks are there, and you can add tracks, you can delete tracks, and we'll get into the other possibilities in documentary number 2. Well, I hope this has been of help. I know it's beginning. We'll get into a little more advanced here shortly. I'm going to do the other documentary today. And until next time, have a great time. GuthrieThomas.com or GTPix.com. Drop by and say hello, and have a great time. Until next time, adios. Thanks for dropping by.